Hello, and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. This is a podcast about diverging from the straight and narrow path, taking the twists and turns of life, particularly mysterious twists and turns. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Hall, and with me is my co-host, somebody I've known for 25 years, Dave Jinks. Dave, what's happening in your
Wow,
world?
has it been 25 years?
It has. That's unbelievable.
Incredible. It is just about 25 this year. Well, things are going well, and I'm really looking forward to our guest tonight because he is a local. I always like to have local guests, and he knows the area, and he's got some very interesting experiences in our area, right about 20 minutes down the road from where we live, really. Some pretty interesting things happened to him there and are happening now. We kind of want to get some insight into what goes on down the road to Yelm.
Okay.
So,
So
Bruce Smith, welcome to our show.
Okay,
And
Daniel and Dave, glad to be here.
just tell us who Bruce is from your
Okay.
perspective.
Okay, I'm 73 years old. I've been a writer much of my adult life. Storyteller, on and off. Went to Nashville to work on my voice and musical chops and to try to be a rock and roll star. And that really opened up my creativity, my talents, my desire. It was a real gift to myself, to my soul, to go to the Music City and to savor all that the Music City has. And fortunately, I like country music, and I certainly like a good fiddle. And I spent 15 months in Nashville. It was a great time. It got a little on the hot side. The day that I left was the day after July 4th or July 5th. And as I drove past the bank going to the interstate, it said it was noon, it was 99 degrees, and the humidity was 94%.
Oh my God.
And I said, I'm getting out of hell. I don't care where I'm going, but I got to get out of here.
yeah.
At first, I went to Santa Fe because, as you can see, I'm wearing the Zia symbol on my hat. I have a fondness for Santa Fe in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. If you read the license plates closely. Ever since I was a kid, I went Boy Scout camping at Philmont Scout Ranch. And it was my first trip west. I grew up in New York, just outside of New York City, on Long Island. And I'm pronouncing that correctly for those of us who are back on Long Island. And so I was 16 and was seeing big mountains, lots of space. It was an interesting trip. I was in 3 traffic jams in 1966. One was leaving New York City, one was coming back to New York City, and the 3rd traffic jam was in Yellowstone National Park, where the bison were holding up traffic because they just wanted to, I don't know, say hi.
Do their thing.
Yeah, right. A few years ago, I've revisited all the places I went, maybe about 10 years ago, on my way back to New York to see mom and dad. And there's traffic everywhere. I was in 3 traffic jams a day, and no matter where I was. 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Colorado Springs. What was going on? I had to stop, ask, what is going on in Colorado Springs? 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Interstate 25 is jammed up. Said nobody knows. So anyway, I came out to Yelm. I came out to the area and moved in 1990 from New York. And I came out to study full-time at the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. And that might be a good starting point to, what was my experience? What did I learn? And why did I come? And, how does it make me the man that I am now?
Yeah, so let's go with what drew you to the Ramtha School of Enlightenment?
The very first thing that drew me was reading about him in a newspaper that came to my mailbox inexplicably one day in 1987, 1988, somewhere around there in the fall, from some of the students that were already here studying with Ramtha in Yelm. And they talked about some of the things that the Ram was teaching at that point. He was very much involved in the environment, and he talked about the days to come, and he was talking about global climate change, and he projected a future where climate change would be so severe that food would be tough to come by and chaos would reign. And I was always a kind of a country boy stuck in the city and was looking for a good reason to get out. And this everything kind of came together for this. I was very active in the environment. I was a professional scoutmaster for a period of time at my Boy Scout camp on Long Island. And so I was very eager to get out of the city and get to the country. But more importantly, Ramtha began teaching me his perspective on what reality is, why we're here, how we got here, where do we come from, where are we going, all those kinds of things. Really, really hit home. It really gelled with me. And to begin with, what I was hearing is that we're more than human beings. We're more than just our bodies and our minds. We are spiritual beings who are here for physical experience in this realm. And there's lots of realms, and this just happens to be one, and this is the body we have to experience it. And elements like the soul and spirit suggests that there's something bigger than us. And Ramtha really taught me a lot about the science of consciousness and how we're very connected to to everything. And I would say that for the next 20 years, I learned a lot about quantum physics and the science of consciousness at Ramtha School. And I also learned a lot of techniques, a lot of disciplines that I found very satisfying. I had meditated a little bit on and off. I found it kind of boring. My mind would drift. I didn't see much happening. It was pleasant, but I'd rather go for a nice walk or go for a swim in the ocean. And Ramtha encouraged me to use my mind, to use my focus for a purpose, to create. And that speaks to another perspective he has, is that we create everything in our lives, all of reality, and that it's achieved through a formula that he called consciousness and energy. His phrase that I heard was, consciousness and energy creates the nature of reality. And I found that was true, that the more awareness I put into my life and I put into my daily activities, and the more consciousness, the more energy that I put into making changes that I wanted, I began to see things getting better for me. And one of the things that came forward for me was my creativity, my storytelling, public speaking. I ended up telling stories on Chaos Radio, KAOS, in 1991, 92, somewhere around there. I had a show for a couple of years and would be telling stories like this, or fairy tales, or legends, King Arthur, that kind of thing. And it was called Stories from the Journey. And that is a phrase that I kind of just got by being at the Ramtha School, that we are on a journey. Excuse me for a second.
Let's get a little bit more basic, because there'll be some people here who'll be saying, who the hell is Ramtha? So
Okay.
yeah, who is Ramtha, and what does he, she, they have to do with the school?
Well, who Ramtha is, I don't know. I studied with him for 20 some odd years, and to be honest with you, I don't know anybody who does know who Ramtha or what Ramtha is. I can tell you what he says, and that is that he is an ascended being, and he he lives in some other realm, some other state of being, some energy. Excuse me for a second. These guys got to go.
Well, Ramtha is a channeled being. That's the most
Correct.
accurate
Yeah.
way to
right. Yeah.
represent
Right.
who?
He's a channel being. So, and the person who channels him is Jay-Z Knight. So Jay-Z Knight lives in Yelm, and she has a regular Jay-Z nightlife. She's in her 70s and has got lots of money and lives in a big house and a mansion and stuff like that. Now, how Ramtha comes into her body, I'm not real sure, but he does. And there's like a complete takeover so that it's Jay-Z's body, but the persona, to my experience, is 100% Ramtha. And to me, there's no, I never confuse who's Jay-Z Knight and who is Ramtha. When Ramtha's in Jay-Z Knight's body, it's Ramtha. It's all Ramtha all the time. And he's very masculine, very muscular. The first time I ever saw him in person was on the stage at a Hilton at an event that he was running at the Hilton at the Hartsfield airport in Atlanta. And as soon as he stepped on stage, he looked like a man, like a being who could command a million men in battle. He had command presence, and I loved it. And I listened to everything he said eagerly. And so,
So would it be fair to say that Jay-Z Knight is a medium?
yes,
That
I think, yeah,
okay.
a trans medium. I think that would be fair to say. I'm not
Okay.
quite sure what she calls herself. I think she calls herself something like that. I haven't been in school. I haven't been actively in school for about 10 years plus. Maybe I think my last retreat that I went to was around 2009, 2010. I went to selective events since then, like Christmas, show up for a good party. And the last one I went to was maybe 3 years ago, and that's when I threw in the towel because, from my perspective, Ramtha made a huge turn in terms of his perspective and his teachings and his what he was delivering to people. And he got very political, very Trumpy, very QAnonymous, and I had no stomach for that. And not so much talking about quantum physics, not talking that I heard a lot of talking about how to create reality. It was getting to be more political, more survival in this time and place.
So let's go back to Jay-Z Knight because I find her
Sure.
kind of interesting. So before Jay-Z Knight and I've heard various stories, but I don't know Jay-Z Knight. I wouldn't know if I ran into her in the store. What did Jay-Z Knight do before she started the School of Enlightenment and started channeling Ramtha? Do you know anything about that story?
Well, she did a couple things, and she's written about it extensively. And when she first met Ramtha was 1977, as I recall the story that she's told. And it was in her kitchen. And she was the wife of a dentist in Tacoma and was raising a couple kids that she had apparently from a previous marriage. Jay-Z's been married a bunch of times. I think she's been married 4 or 5 times. I've lost count. So, I've been married a few times too. So, hey, no one's keeping count on me. So, hey, what's fair is fair.
today.
Okay. So, and so she was basically a homemaker and a wife and a mom and stuff like that. Prior to that, the reason how she ended up in Tacoma was that she was a gal that was down in Texas or the plains of New Mexico along the border of Texas. And she ended up working at a cable company when cable was just starting out. And she's a pretty dynamic gal. So she rose through the ranks pretty quick, and they made her a field, or a regional director or something like that in the Pacific Northwest. She ended up in Tacoma. And how long she did that, I don't know. Bunch of years. Was good at it. And met this dentist,
Did that story stretch her credibility with you that she went from being an average person homemaker to channeling some kind of a entity that you could build a school around? Did that stretch her credibility in your mind?
No, not at all. Does it you?
Well, I've never seen Jay-Z Knight. I've just heard about her. So that's one of the reasons to have you on our program.
Yeah. Well, Jay-Z, he wants to talk to you. Give him a call.
Well, that brings up one of my my biggest curiosities about the whole school is that it seems I've lived here for how long? 25 plus years. And I don't think I know a thing. I mean, I don't know a thing about the school. I don't know a thing about Jay-Z Knight. And I've driven past what I'd call a compound. I don't know if
Right.
that's it seems like a compound. It seems pretty secretive. I mean, can you tell us about the secrecy surrounding the school, if there is any? Does she make public appearances, or is it mostly for her school students? I mean, what's a typical day like inside that
Oh, Dave, you're asking
school?
me a ton of questions here. Let me say this in terms of secrecy. I would say there is a degree of secrecy for a variety of reasons,
Mhm.
some of which are very healthy and necessary.
Yeah.
And they're essential for people who are thinking new thoughts, who are thinking big thoughts, and who are making a psychological and emotional break with their past. They are transforming themselves psychologically in a spiritual practice. And it's a school that, you know, Ramtha's School of Enlightenment is accurately titled.
Mhm.
As a school, though, the experience of studying at the school is one of personal transformation. And I loved the transformations that I went through and underwent and became. And that's why I stayed, and that's why I paid a ton of money. And it's not cheap. It's basically ballpark figure. It's $100 a day. So if you go for a week, it's 700 grand. You know, it's $1,000. If you go for a night, it's 100. All right, something like that. Ballpark figure.
Mhm.
Um,
So,
now,
so I'm reflecting upon my background. Part of my background is I was a college professor for 16 years at Tacoma Community College and South Puget Sound Community College. So when you say school, I have a paradigm in my mind that may be nothing like the School of Enlightenment. So how does one, is there a course catalog that you select courses from? Yeah, to talk about the kind of the mechanics of the school.
okay, for me, how the school functioned for me, it functioned in effect as a graduate seminar program where there would be general topics, generally um, more euphemistic than specific. So he wouldn't talk about, you know, Tuesday night, we're going to talk about quantum physics and what's the difference between a boson and a fermion. So you never saw anything, a course description like that.
Mhm.
But so he would say things like going to the future or something like that, right? But for me and for most of the people that I went to school with, most of my schoolmates, we were good for anything that he did. You know, it was like, you know, give me the next, you know, here's my cup, fill it up. What's next? You know, and whatever he was pouring, I was drinking, and it worked for me for 20 some odd years. Doesn't work now, but it worked then.
Mhm.
Um, so
So the average class, and once again I'm trying to fit it into the schema that I'm familiar with as far as schools are concerned. The average class lasted how long?
um, an average day, let's say, first of all, nights, evening of, we call them events. Evening events would start about 7 o'clock at night. The Rand would speak for a couple hours, and then there would probably be some exercise or activity where we would he would either teach a discipline or or we would apply the discipline. And this was a format that was just amplified and continued on the week-long retreats. And there were some events that went a month, and they were called BOTAs. And I don't know if they still continue, but I love them. I back in the day when I was going to the school, when the event was over, I was the last one to leave. I felt so full, so good, um, and it was hollow ground, hallowed ground for me.
Hmm.
Now, what the disciplines are, and there's dozens of them, and it's basically different ways to do to do meditations.
Hmm.
Ramtha, I never heard him use the word meditation except when he was making a joke about Buddhists or the gurus in the Himalayas or things like that. He makes lots of jokes and he has lots of opinions about gurus and things. And I never heard him describe himself as a guru. He always described himself to me as a teacher, and that's how I experienced him. And what I learned in terms of these disciplines was different kinds of meditations, either sitting still, sometimes laying down, but not falling asleep. So being able to maintain a mindfulness in an alpha rhythm state. So your mind is leaving all going to have for dinner or how to pay the rent tomorrow. You're leaving all those troubles behind, and you're open to the bigger picture. Now, there's other things that we did. What we did most of the time, I would say 50%, we did any kind of discipline, that I did any kind of discipline, was what was known as field work. And in field work, we first would make some kind of focus card on a piece of paper, and then give everybody these cards so they were all equal. And you would draw on them a picture or a sign or a symbol or a word that represented what you wanted to manifest in your life, either something you wanted to create or something you wanted to get rid of, like fear, doubts, tension, anger. You wanted to create better relationships, you want some money, get a new job, but better car, so whatever you want, you put that on the card. And the card gets put in a baggie, and then the bags all get mixed up, and somebody puts them up on the fences in this big, huge horse paddock that's about as big as a football field. And the pictures are all turned to the wall, to the fence line. So when you're in the field, all you see are all these little white things flapping in the breeze, but you can't see any pictures. Okay, so you don't know where your card is, and the task is to focus by using some of the disciplines as you're walking to find your card. And what I would hear the Ram encourage us, this is like life, where you get up in the morning, you put your pants on, and you got to find your way. Can you hold your focus in traffic, talking to the boss, dealing with people, things like that, making lunch, taking care of the kids, all these distractions. So 1,000 people, and typically the arena that we were in fit 1,000 people. So most of the events I went to were full when they had 1,000 people. So when we would go to this football field to focus on our cards, it was crowded, and you banged into people all the time. And it wasn't uncommon to get an eye stuck, somebody's finger stuck in your eye or up your nose. It was, strange things like that, or someone stepping on your foot, but that's all part of the process. That's all part of the training. Even when you're getting bumped up, can you still hold on to your focus? And the truth is, yes, you can. That's how deep you go. If you're out there for 10 hours, you're going to go deep, or you're going to go to sleep, one or the other, but you're not going to just bounce around out there for 10 hours. That's for sure. So I found that very purposeful, and it took me a couple years before I found my card. And the last time I was in the field, I found my card in 15 minutes, like that. Boom. And it was sublime. I just walked around a little bit. I felt like I was on a sidewalk going right to my card. Zoom, zeroed in on it. There it was. No fooling around. And I felt that I had accomplished that level of focus, and I felt very proud of myself. I was ready for the next one.
What was your card?
Pot of gold.
Pot of gold. And what did that symbolize? Actual financial well-being?
Yeah. Exactly. And
So
that's why I'm talking to you now. I mean, because I've manifested that. Last January, I left New York with 100 grand in my pocket. And a lot of that is gone since then, because I've done a lot of different things. But, and yes, it came from an inheritance. Yes, it came from my mother and father, who saved and scrimped and never spent a dime. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But nevertheless, I got 100 grand in my pocket. So to me, that's a manifestation.
Dave, why don't you jump in here?
I'm wondering, are there rules, what kind of rule? I know you probably can't share the insider secrets and all that, but are there rules? Can you, do you have to commit to a certain number of classes, a certain time period that you're there? Are
No,
there
no.
different
There's
programs?
there's two rules. There's two rules. There's one called being current. And so that means is that certain events, retreats would be determined to be cutting edge, the priority teaching of that year or that season, that month, whatever.
Mhm,
And you had to go to that event if you wanted to continue in the school. You
mhm.
could miss that event, but then you kind of have to go back to like a more beginner or more basic and kind of work your way up. And so the school was progressive in that sense, that not everybody could handle or understand the more advanced teachings as we're in 5, 10, 20 years worth. Um, like I said, not everybody knocking on the door wanting to go to the Ramtha School of Enlightenment is going to know the difference between a fermion and a boson. And so you got to learn that somewhere, okay? And for
Yeah.
some of us, we learned it in physics, and some of us learned it at the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. The second rule is don't teach. And if you think anybody wants to learn, or someone asks you, hey, how do you heal yourself? How do you use your mind? How do you meditate? I can say, and I can only give them generalities about what I do. I said, well, I sit quiet and, take it from there. I said, but if you want to learn the specificities, you got to go hear it from the Ram, because that's what he's requested. He said, if anyone wants to know what you know that I've taught you, tell them to come see me. That's
And
the deal.
why do you think that rule existed, Bruce?
The reason that was given to me from that I heard from the Ram is that he wants to keep a certain kind of purity, and I saw this every teacher, whenever I've had a new level of responsibility or a new level of power, things get corrupted pretty quickly. They get twisted into what I think is a better way of teaching it, or a more truthful or a more fundamental, and so things get corrupted pretty quickly. And I think it's accurate. You want to know what Ramtha teaches, go to Ramtha. Bingo. All right. Got a problem with that? Go to somewhere else. Talk to Deepak Chopra.
Are they, are there
No.
people who, do students reside there? I'm still kind of on Dan's wavelength here. I'm trying to picture it compared, because of course I went to a university, and it's like, well, you got your dorms, you got your mess, your lunch hall, you got your tuition due at certain times, and you got your class schedule and all that. If there are 1,000 people there, where are all the people? I drive past there all the time. I don't see anybody. It seems like it's abandoned. So how is it administratively put together? Who keeps
Okay.
track of whether
So
you've taken the class you're supposed to, or whatever? The administrative part is the nightmare that I see in a college.
yeah, and I'm here to tell you, the Ramtha School has really struggled with the administrative aspects of running a very large operation.
Well, that
They're not
makes
too
sense.
savvy. That's my experience. The place is pretty screwed up, actually. You know, um, just simple things like getting enough bathrooms. It seems to be like,
Yeah, that's what I'm
yeah.
thinking of.
But
The
at
practical
any
stuff.
rate, so 1,000 people show up. Where does everybody go? Well, everybody sleeps in a tent, or they sleep in the arena, and it's pretty cozy. Um, and that's it for the event. When the event's over, you're out. You got to go home. Wherever home is, you're going back there, buddy. And that's the beauty of RSC, because it's intense, it's powerful, it's progressive, but it's very concentrated, and it's focused on a particular location, but it doesn't become your life. You're not going to live there. You're not going to work there. You're not going to eat there. You got to take care of all the basics of your life on your own. So you got to go find a house, rent a place, move in with people, group house. And I've done all that stuff. And so the fact that there is a real clear delineation between studying with the Ramtha and you running your life, very two separate things. And that's very beautiful. And it's one of the problems when I look and I hear the stories of what happened down in Antelope, Oregon, Osho, and the other
Yeah.
gurus, where everybody lives together and they're eating together and they're making money together, and then it's we're going to police the town together, and we're going to wear red, or burgundy, so we know who's who, who the townies are. It's like, oh, that's culty, now.
Well, that's kind of where I want to go with this, being a sociology teacher. And once again, I'm a novice when it comes to the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. It's just, I'm focusing on what I've heard. And I've heard the word cult used in regarding to the school. What would you say about that?
Well, I can tell you what other people say. There's a guy by the name of Melton, wrote a book about. He's a Baptist minister or something. He writes lots of books on religion, and he says cults, the word people use when they want to diss you, when they want to trash you, and it's a nice, quick, shorthand word, and is the Ramtha School of Enlightenment a cult? No. Can it be a cult for some people under certain conditions? Yes. Was it for me? No. Do I know people who I feel are like in groupthink or cult think? Yes. Because, but then so is the whole Republican Party. We got Trump. I'm surrounded by Trumpers, and
I know.
are they in a cult? Hell yeah.
Yeah, they are. I think
You
they
can't
are.
talk to them about it, but
Yeah.
okay.
So that by implication here, by inference, uh, people could be in a cult with the School of Enlightenment, but not admit it or realize it, based on what you
Uh,
just said about Trump.
To the extent that current Ramtha students, guys who are going to events on a regular basis, who's subscribed to Trump being the savior of humanity and all of and I don't know the specifics of what Trump is, of what Ramtha is saying about Trump. I'm just hearing secondhand, third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand, all right, from gossip. That's it. And so I don't know of what Ramtha is talking about over the past 8 years. Okay. So, but it is the Ramtha School, from my perspective currently, is that it's MAGA City. It is Trumpville, morning, noon, and night. And to me, that's an unhealthy place to be. However, I must say this, the people that I know, and I have an ex-wife, I have a guy I lived with for 20 years that's still in school. Yeah, I know a lot of people who are still in school. I got to say this. They look younger. They look healthier. They're more authentic. They're truer to who they really are. They're happier. And they're graceful when they tell me to my face that they consider me a lethal threat because I'm vaccinated.
Really?
Yeah. So is that person in a cult? Is that person crazy? Or is that person just your average right-wing American? Take your pick.
Yeah.
All I know is that it's not healthy for me to be in an intimate relationship with them, to live with them, to work with them, to have dinner with them, to drink wine with them. They consider me a lethal threat. I've been told to my face.
Really?
And yeah, because I'm vaccinated, and they feel that vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine in particular, is toxic and it's going to kill you. And why I'm still hale and hearty, we don't know quite yet. But the people that I know that are in the Ramtha school feel that I'm a threat physically because of my vaccine status. I'm going to breathe on them, and I'm going to breathe remnants of messenger RNA vaccine in my breath, or scrape off my skin, rub it off on them or something.
Well, to be fair, I mean, you don't have to look very hard to or very long to see cult-like thinking or group think, as you mentioned, Bruce. It's a human thing, I think. We try not to be too political on this show. There are a lot more interesting things to talk about. But Dan and I agree with your perspective on this, at least. And I'm wondering if Jay-Z Knight, how much does she, you said they're separate people, Jay-Z versus Ramtha, but clearly the vessel, you would think it's possible to affect the message because it's coming through her. Do you think it's been her influence that's maybe corrupting Ramtha's message, or just an interpretation of his message that's leading to this more right-wing leaning teachings at this point?
I don't think so. I'd be surprised if Jay-Z had any influence on what Ramtha's teaching.
So why would so can you explain who Ramtha is? I mean, I'm a little, it's a little sketchy for me. I've heard the story, but I don't remember exactly. Dan probably knows more, but just for our listeners, will you tell us who Ramtha is known to be or thought to be?
Well, let's take a bigger picture. It's what kinds of beings are there in all of the universe, in all that is? Where does God live? Who is God? What is God? What are ascended masters? What's Jesus doing these days? How about Buddha? Blessed Virgin Mary? How about the saints? People who have done remarkable things. 300 saints in the Catholic Church have levitated, but they're dead. So what are they doing these days? So people, we're one element of existence. We're one element of beingness in a vast potpourri of experiences, of souls and spirits and ascended masters and different energy levels. And I think there are beings that inhabit every element of life. So we are the beings here on the surface of the planet Earth. There are beings who live in the water. There are beings who live in the ground. It's a different environment and they're different beings, but nevertheless, they are beings. So where in this vast matrix array of experiences and of beingness does Ramtha reside? Somewhere out there. Is it energetic? I believe so. And I believe that as you find greater awareness, greater connection, as you become closer to your soul, as you become closer through your thoughts and actions and desires and intentions to be closer to the is, to closer to all that is. The word God is limited. I don't use the word God voluntarily in conversation because I think it's too limited and it creates instant images of like the big guy with the beard and supreme being. Okay. I think that's very limited. It's not very subtle, and I don't think it's very real. To me, it's inadequate. I think other religions and other spiritual practices get closer to the truth when they say the all, the is, things like that, the source.
Yeah, I agree.
So
And
I think that's more helpful.
Does Ramtha have an archetype? I mean, sometimes you mentioned strong, like a warrior type, as opposed to a goddess or some other type of an alien, or
he's a kick-ass guy from the get-go.
What's that?
He's a kick-ass guy from the get-go. Think General Patton who meditates.
So there's some strength behind it. There's some character that's different from
and that's his story. I mean, that's his narrative. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. But this is what I've heard him say, is that he lived on this planet 35,000 years ago, as a human being from the Lemurian genetic lineage, and battled with the Alations, who were another lineage, and became a world conqueror and led 1 million men into battle at one point and ruled the world. And then was assassinated during an assassination attempt, ended up being critically injured and recuperated, and took him 7 years. And he called, what I heard him say is my understanding is he sat on a rock for 7 years and was attended to by people who loved him and cherished him and wanted to take care of him. And in that process of long seclusion, began to develop this understanding of the other parts of life. And he had an out-of-body experience, and at one point, and that was the triggering event for him to become a spiritual master.
So there is a rich, detailed history like you would get from Jesus or any figure that has taken on that sort of archetype as being an ascended master, as you say, which I think is appropriate and encompasses the largeness of what we're talking about, but isn't limited to the God word, like you say, which I agree is a little unsatisfied. It's too generic. It's watered down.
Yeah, it's too limited. It's almost useless as a term, other than using it politically.
Yeah, I think you can really latch on to someone, a hero that has a backstory, whether it's metaphorical or whatever, or if it's literal. He lived 35,000 years ago, was a human, and went through these trials and became, an ascended person or a spiritually advanced person that we seek to emulate at some level. I think people really, that sells the program a little more, not to say that it's you need to sell certain things. People find what they need at the time when they need it. And like you did, you came across the country and that was what you needed at that time. People will find it. It's easier to latch on to a story, though, that really resonates with you. And you said, how many, do you think there's still 1,000 members at any given time, or is there any way to know those numbers?
I don't. The only way is to call the school and ask them how many people are showing up. The school at this point, when I was active in the school, the school was very Yelm centric. Basically, if you wanted to see the Ram, you wanted to go to an event with the Ram, you had to live in Yelm and go to the arena on Jay-Z's property. And somewhere around 10, 15 years ago, then they started going with all the Zoom kind of calls, internet. And at that point, my sense is that the participation in the school exploded. And a lot of people, and they also expanded their availability. What was making it so there were a lot of CDs that were available, a lot of YouTube. There were a lot of videos that you could watch. You have to pay for them to watch, but so there was a lot going out on the internet. And I noticed in the last couple of events that I went to when I was a regular at the school, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, that I was bumping into people from communist China, all over the world, Papua New Guinea, everywhere in Africa, South America, the Philippines, people from the jungles. It's like, wow, you heard about the Ram? You got your ass over here. That's right, because this is the only place to hear this stuff. He's the only one teaching this kind of stuff. Well, I said, you're right. This is the only place, because I don't know any other place to go.
Once again, this is just based on hearsay, but I was told that there were a lot of celebrities that were members of the school of Enlightenment. Did you find that to be the case?
No. Salma Hayek went to school, and I asked her for a date in 2000.
Well, let's go down that path, because
I'm happy to go down that path. It's nothing but good memories.
Good.
To back up a little bit,
Okay.
Yeah, you probably should back
The
up.
month the month before I asked her for a date, I had decided I wanted to run for the presidency of the United States.
Cool.
Okay.
And when I was pretty active for 6 weeks, I was working it, trying to raise money. I was getting ready to go to New Hampshire to go to the primaries, yada 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 yada.
Hmm.
One of the things when you tell people that you're running for the president of the United States, my experience is that all your friends go bye-bye.
Hmm.
And like, it's Bruce, we knew you were weird, but you gone
We didn't
too
expect you to be
far
that
this
weird.
time. You because you ain't coming back. You know?
Mhm.
So in August of 2003, Oprah magazine published an interview with Salma Hayek.
Hmm.
And now I had already known that Salma had been coming to some of the events, but I didn't know who she was. I figured she's another one of these cute, Mexican gals, right?
Mhm.
And Oprah asked her a question that I thought was spot on. And she said, Salma, you're 40 years old and you've never been married. How come? And Salma said, because I haven't met my match.
Hmm.
And when I read that, I said, Salma, you and me, we have got to get together because there is no match in my life at all. I blew everybody away.
Oh, wow.
So I went looking for Salma Hayek. Now, I thought I'd find her. She's got to be around here somewhere, right? We live in the same town, right? So I started asking friends, do you know who Salma is? And they go, yeah. I said, can you introduce her to me? Because I think we might have something to talk about, this
Right.
match thing, right? And they said, no, I won't.
Hmm.
No.
I said, because that's not right. So I went to my friend in the administration. I said, look, Mike, I know that you forward letters to certain individuals who are in school, because you have forwarded letters to me from people out in the world who hear about me, either my alien abduction stories or because I'm a storyteller or I went to Nashville or whatever it was that I did that resonates somewhere out there in the world. Someone writes, Bruce Smith, care of the Ramtha School of Enlightenment in Washington. It ends up on my friend Mike's desk and he mails it back to me. Okay.
Hmm.
I said, can you do the same for me now? Because I would like to invite Salma Hayek to the Christmas ball in December. And he
Hmm.
said, no, not going to do it. I said, Mike, come on. You're busting my chops. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. Nobody would help me. So I said, okay, you're going to be like that, huh? All right. So then I called her agent and then I called her manager and they said, no, we're not going to do it.
Hmm.
So I said, oh yeah, watch this. I wrote a letter to her father. I knew he was in some town in the Central Highlands in Mexico. I didn't speak any Spanish and I didn't bother with any Google translations. I just said, dear senor, I would like to ask your daughter out for a date and I apologize for not speaking any English. And if you can help me, thanks. I never heard back from him. 2 years later, I was going to an event and walking through the front door and this cute Mexican gal was coming out the door in the opposite direction. And she saw me, we locked eyes, and she stopped and she froze like she had seen a ghost. I said, that's got to be Salma. As it turns out, I was sitting 2 rows behind her through the event. And I kept looking at her. After a couple of days, I gave up. I said, I think I'm just going to give up on Salma and listen to Ramtha. And that was it. And at the end of the event, I walk into the bookstore and gonna buy some stuff, take home with me when the event's over. And the place is empty, except for Salma. I walk up to her and I said, excuse me, Salma, but you have a minute? She goes, yeah. I said, can you do me a favor? Can you relay an apology to your father?
Hmm.
She's my father. I said, yeah. 2 years ago, I wrote him a letter. I wanted to ask you out on a date to the Christmas event, and everybody around here wouldn't tell me who you were or how to get in touch with you. So I ended up writing to your father. And I now realize I went too far. Involving your family in my Michigas is like, that's not good. She goes, yeah, he was pissed.
Oh, wow.
So I said,
Okay.
so will you let him know that I am apologizing? And she raised her hand, she didn't reach her hand out. She just raised it like robotically, just from her at her elbow. And I shook her hand and she said, apology accepted, sir. And that's the last I ever saw her.
Wow.
Wow, great story.
I learned during the 2016 campaign for the presidency that Donald Trump also asked Selma out for a date at the same time I was asking for a date, 2003, the fall of 2003. She turned him down too. So,
Well, the difference was
yeah,
Donald
I was
Trump
good
was
company.
married and you probably
Yeah.
weren't, right?
No, this was just before Melania. He married
Oh.
Melania the next week, but that,
Oh, okay.
he asked Salma for a date first. Okay.
Oh, the next week? What?
Something like that. Donnie doesn't wait.
Sounds
When
about
Donnie
right.
wants,
Yeah.
Donnie gets. Come on.
Yeah, that's true.
You
Well, I
know?
want to be respectful of our time here and Bruce's time. So, Dave, do you have any? I have one other line of questioning. Do you have anything else you want to ask Bruce before we
Well,
let him go in an event?
yeah, I wanted to follow up on something that Bruce said in our pre interview time. He gave us a little bit about his background working with well, what can you just kind of go over, give us the 30-second summary of what you did before you moved here, working with the environment on
My first big job
pollution.
out of college was I was a recreation therapist in psychiatry. And I'm somebody who did a lot of work with youth groups, Boy Scout camps, working as a scoutmaster, YMCA's, things like that. Played a lot of sports, and was very musical, a lot of drama, writing, things like that. And I did that all with my psychiatric patients for 10 years, 12 years, something like that, at a local county hospital in New York, and then for the VA, Northport VA. Give a shout out to the VA. And then went into something completely different, and I became a commercial beach cleaner in 1982. And for 8 summers, I had modified potato harvesters that I used throughout the greater metropolitan area on 100 different beaches, and using these harvesters to remove garbage from the sand. And my business was known as Sand Sifter Beach Cleaning Company. And through that, I became very environmentally aware of the degradation in the shoreline environment. And from that, then I became exposed to Ramtha's teachings on the environment, and really embraced him. He really seemed very legitimate to me. And that was my entree into Ramtha, so that I could hear the more spiritual aspects, talking about the God within, and consciousness and elements like that.
Yeah.
When I was in the Ramtha school, I needed a job, and went back to St. Peter's Hospital in Olympia, worked there for 4 years in psychiatry as the activity therapist, and left there to hit the road as a traveling storyteller, and tried to make a go of it as a professional, and ended up in Nashville and tried to develop my performing abilities, and ended up working as a stagehand quite a bit, and came back to Seattle, eventually worked as a stagehand here in Seattle, and started writing about my experiences in a newspaper column that I was able to freelance a teeny weeny bit, called Stories from Backstage. And from that, I got a job as a real newspaper reporter, and in 2006, and I've been writing a lot since then. So I wrote for the Dispatch, Eatonville Dispatch, for 4 years, and then I started an online news magazine called The Mountain News, which continued all of that. And in all of that, I became very aware that D.B. Cooper, the skyjacker in 1971, in his getaway flight, flew right over my house on his getaway. And so it's a local story. And I've written 3 books on D.B. Cooper. and
Didn't
been
didn't
in
know
half a
that.
dozen documentaries.
I didn't know.
Huh?
Well, let me I'll let Dan have the last questions. I wanted to expand a little bit though on the message that drew you to the West Coast. And that was one about environmental catastrophe potentially.
Yes.
And I wanted to maybe draw a parallel here, and let me know if you think it's appropriate or not, with what we hear from people who have encounters or experiences with what I'll just call alien intelligence. And it seems that going back decades and decades, that has been a consistent message from the so-called aliens, or this alien intelligence, wherever it originates. Is
Certainly
there
the
a
Greys.
parallel?
Yeah.
Is there a parallel between what you're hearing from a Ramtha entity and what people report talking with ET or getting messages from ET? Because we have a lot of shows about ET on Anomalies here. I want to make that connection if there is one.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about my alien experiences, my abduction experiences.
Well, yeah, you
Um,
kind of dropped that in there. I'm sure
Yeah.
that Dan's ears perked up like mine. I don't know if that's something
Yeah.
you want to go into now. We could do that a different show, but if you want to.
Well, I can give you a taste. When I came to Yelm, my
Mhm.
abduction started. All right.
Really?
It's like, welcome to Yelm. We're the Greys and we'd like to have sex with you. Yeah, is that okay with you? So
Okay, well,
um,
you're getting the
yeah,
same
so
message from those guys. Is that, I guess that's what I'm asking.
yeah, in short, everything is connected. And at this point, those of us, in fact, I'm hosting a barbecue for experiencers in 2 weeks here at the place. Instead of, because we're all Zooming all the time, all the chat rooms and the support groups and yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
And it's time for us to actually see everybody in the physical. It's all connected. Ramtha teaching me techniques, expanding my mind about the possibilities of being unlimited, being immortal, how to do that, how to levitate, how to heal with a thought, all these kinds of elements of unlimitedness. And I think that the aliens, particularly the Greys, particularly for anyone's interested, if you're not listening to who Bashar is and what he's saying, you're missing out, I think, on a real fantastic, wonderful source of information about what the alien agenda is. And I
How do you
think the
spell that?
Bashar,
Yeah.
B-A-S-H-A-R.
Bashar. Okay.
Bashar is another channel guy like Ramtha. He's been channeling through a fellow down in LA by the name of Daryl Anka for 35 years, something like that. He's cheap. You want to listen to him, it's $35 a pop on a video. That's great. And he gives you a little meditation afterwards. And you want to listen to some question and answers from the Bashar people, it's great. It's money well spent. And he describes himself as being a first contact specialist. And his job is to help get us ready for contact, direct physical conscious contact with extraterrestrials, in particular the Greys. And he says their agenda, the folks that invited me to have sex with them and then later had sex with me, according to my lucid dream states, what my memory is, and the hypnosis that I went through and everything like that, to build a hybrid race. Now, my perspective current is that there was no sex and there's no hybrid. I don't have babies in space. All right. My kids aren't flying around in some spaceship waiting to see daddy. Okay. The hybridization is coming through consciousness. As our consciousness evolves, as we become more mindful, we will able to merge with other species. And Bashar says, I'm getting you ready for those who choose this journey to leave your Homo sapienness behind and merge with my people who are choosing to do this with you, to become a new species called Homo galacticus. When I heard him say that for the first time, I said, you got to be friggin' kidding me, because I have been telling myself, I haven't told anybody else in the world, I feel like I'm leaving my Homo sapienness behind. And what I called my journey I called it Homo Divinity, a new kind of human being, a human being that can do through their mind over matter, is absolutely unlimited. The question is, how do you do it? How do you get going? I'm only able to achieve little bitsy itsy things here and there, and I'm 70 pounds overweight. My God, I can't lose weight. What's my problem? Don't I have the consciousness for that? You know, I got a heart attack. How the hell does a guy like me get a heart attack? I'm focusing. I'm meditating every day. Well, yeah, it's more complex, and I'm learning that, and I'm dealing with all the doubts and all of the anger and the angst. It's like, oh my God, 30 years with Ramtha, and I'm still like a putz. Oy, oy, oy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in therapy 1,000 times. I've seen 20 different therapists over the last 40 years.
It shows how hard
How
it
much
is.
more mindful can I get?
It shows how hard it is to be a
Yeah.
human and be in this body, in this physical world, with being cut off largely from spirituality, the way we are, unfortunately.
I got to say this. I want to give a shout out to everyone here in the Olympia area and the Pacific Northwest. We're living in this summer, really hit home for me. The rest of the world's on fire, or they're drowning, or they're baking, and we are living a sweet life. And
true.
I believe it's from our consciousness that as a collective, we are creating more harmony with Mother Nature. And I think Mother Nature's taking care of us, keeping those winds from the ocean that keep kind of blowing in all the time, blowing all that smoke away. Keep it up in Canada, keep it down in California, but don't let it come to the Puget Sound Valley. And I believe part of this, for those who are bitching about Governor Inslee charging $5.29 a gallon for gasoline, primarily that's to discourage us from driving,
Right.
keep the carbon down. And I think it's programs and decisions and consciousness like that, actions like that, high gas prices that are keeping our air clean. I think there's a quid pro quo. In Texas, you go to Texas, you can get your tank filled to $2.29 a gallon. Yeah, I sure wouldn't want to live there though. I was there in February. And I said, this place is a disaster. This is hell warmed over.
Let me get in one last comment here, and then we'll let Bruce
Ed.
go do some other things. So you've stated several times that you're no longer a student of the School of Enlightenment. So from a consumer standpoint of view, if you were thinking about becoming a student there, what should you look at? And maybe that reflects why you're not a student there anymore. But what would you tell somebody who's thinking of being a prospective student?
Check it out. Go. Now, for those who have an inkling but don't want to spend $100 a day or whatever it is, buy a couple books. There's one book that's great, and it's called A Beginner's Guide to Creating Your Reality. And it's really a primer on Ramtha. It talks about what he did back in Lemuria 35,000 years ago. It talks about all the different levels of consciousness and the different elements in our body. Most people call them chakras. Ramtha calls them seals, and they're seals to open up into other realms, and how that all kind of works together. And this whole thing about consciousness and energy creating the nature of reality, and different kinds of techniques and disciplines you can do to meditate. And it's a real primer, and it's a real good book, and it's easy to read, and it's well written, and I highly recommend it. And if it costs $20, it's a great investment. See a couple of videos. There's a million of them, and go for it, or call Dan, and Dan will get in touch with me. And if you want to chat with me, anybody that's curious or wants to know more, or I don't want anybody to be bitching like, my sister-in-law was in that Ramtha school and she's been crazy. I don't want to hear that. Talk. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce,
Don't
we'd
blame
really
me.
like to thank you for spending time with us, and your honesty
No, it's
and
been
your
an honor.
humor.
Yeah,
Humor
yeah.
comes through, and maybe we can have you
Thank you.
back talking about some other subjects.
Yeah,
Love to.
it was
Always, anytime.
it
And
was a
I will endeavor to remember to our appointment. I'm glad you sent me a second email because I was having dinner and my landlady came by and we were talking and I spaced it. Sorry.
Well,
Okay.
we're
Done.
glad we hooked up with you. Anyway,
My pleasure. My distinct
was
pleasure.
it
Thank
was
you
a
very much for
real
having me.
Bruce, I'd like to say it was a real whirlwind of ideas, but somehow you reined it in. It was like controlled chaos. I was pretty impressed.
That's what I'm all about, baby. Controlled chaos.
I
Yeah.
can tell.
Morning, noon, and
Very,
night. Oh,
very
working it.
unique guest. I'm sure Dan would agree, but it was a delight, and an hour and a half passed in an instant to me. So it was great talking with you. We really appreciate you being on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
see you down the road, Bruce.
Okay.
See you next time down the road. Okie dokie.